Welcome, welcome. Great. Yelena, could you help me out by sharing the screen?
Sure, just a second. Welcome, everybody.
Welcome. Yes,
Welcome.
please feel free to drop your name, how you're feeling today, what's going on for you, how you came today. We've got Gil from England. We've got, well, I can see many of you on the line. Okay, Merva from Mexico. Welcome, welcome. So as I mentioned, we just started that if you're looking for a conversation around digital platforms, digital participation platforms, and how to use them for grant making, you've come to the right place. We're going to do our best to make this an interesting and useful conversation for you all. We're really encouraged by the amount of discussion on this conversation, both on our listserv and in other places. So we're hoping that this will be useful to many of us. Next slide. So as we get started, I'm going to do the somewhat boring but sort of necessary Zoomy reminders here. We are recording, and not only are we recording, but this will be posted on YouTube. So if you don't love the idea of having your face or your name on YouTube, we don't blame you, but do know that you might want to switch off your camera or put a spy name or something in your description, because we will be recording. You're very welcome to use the chat freely. Yelena is going to be helping us out today, keep track of the chat and the questions and the comments. And please do right now introduce and rename yourselves as you choose, with a name, pronouns, organization, location, whatever you'd like to share about yourself in your name and in the chat. And essentially, we realize that this is about participatory grant making, participatory platforms. So we want to call ourselves out that we are not being very participatory by having this session exclusively in English. We have closed captioning, but it's only in English. We want you to know that we are aware of this and we are working towards budgeting and securing proper interpretation in multiple languages going forward. So acknowledgement here on this. Just a small tip, I think everyone knows this by now. Please do mute yourself when you're not speaking. And if you can, and if you're comfortable, we'd love to see your face when we have conversations. But no pressure, being on camera all the time is exhausting. So we get it. And the last point is, if you have any tech issues, Yelena will do her best to support you, so you can message her directly. And today we're hoping to be together for at least 90 minutes, at least 60 minutes, maybe as much as 90, depending on how much questions and interaction you'd all like to have for the last portion of the session. So those are the Zoomy reminders, and I'm Emily Sullivan, and today I'm representing the Participatory Grantmaking group, but we're really happy to be co-hosting this session alongside People Powered and highlighting the good work of community-based funders and other funders like Fund Action and Camden Giving today. So before we really dive in, next slide, please. We're going to ask Yelena to give us a bit of a quick update on what's happening for the PGM community in particular, to make sure you don't miss out on the upcoming events. So hit us with the quick hits, Yelena. What's happening next?
Well, first of all, I hope that everybody's familiar with the PGM community. We started 3 years ago as a group of 6 enthusiasts about participatory grant-making. We're now over 1,400 people really passionate about participatory grant-making from 73 different countries all over the world, and we have a host of events behind us, and also we are preparing many new events coming up. So last month, for example, we had a face-to-face meetup of participatory grant makers in Manchester, UK, which was really successful. It was a great gathering. And there are many conferences in May in the US where PGM community is going to be present as well. And when it comes to upcoming events, May the 2nd and May the 4th, we have two participatory grant-making peer support sessions. Bear in mind that these are the same events, just held at different times for different time zones, because as I said, we are in so many time zones. So in May, we usually choose two focus questions that we discuss in peer support sessions based on the most exciting conversations on listserv. So in May, we'll be focusing on engaging youth in participatory grant-making processes, in particular, how we can help young people become more involved in participatory grant-making, and also how to help organizations that support young people get to more unrestricted funding. So these are the sessions in May, and I'll be posting the links later in chat. And then we have a deep dive on May 17th. It's an online event about how you get started with participatory grant-making, all the tips and challenges for newcomers, for beginners in participatory grant-making, and also to do with young people and vulnerable people. On May 24th, we have a deep dive session on safeguarding, and we'll be working with Funders Safeguarding Collaborative, who just recently posted guidelines for implementing safeguarding in participatory grant-making practices. So that's the upcoming events, and please join us.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Yana, for that. We're now going to launch a poll to get a sense of where you all are at. Essentially, what brought you here today. So Yana, we'll do that in just a moment. We want to get a better sense of, when you think about the digital platforms that you're currently using, do they essentially make your vision possible? Or are they really holding you back? We want to get a sense of this because the whole reason this session even happened is because on our very active listserv, there was a quick back and forth between quite a number of people basically asking, what platform do you use? I'm always ending up with Google Sheets somehow. People were feeling like, oh, I use this. Oh, interesting. I use this. And it was a quick, so many people seem to be genuinely interested in the platform piece. And so when we launch this poll in just a minute, we want to get a sense of how much you feel your actual platform helps or hurts your ability to do the kind of work you want to do. And the real fundamental reason beyond the listserv chat that brings us here is this issue that we all know as participatory grant makers or aspiring participatory grant makers, that the process really matters. How the process functions, what you use to support the process, is a really critical part of the whole purpose of the grant making. And we know that most of the time, the platforms themselves are actually designed to solve quote unquote donors' problems, not communities' problems. They often don't have the kinds of services or features that many of us who are participatory grant makers want to see and have, like community building, transparency, collaboration. Luckily, thanks to People Powered, we know some of the platforms that exist based on their guide of these kinds of features that can actually support the values of participatory grant making throughout the process. So let's take a look and see how well do you feel that the platforms you're using actually support your vision for this. Great. So is your platform making your vision possible? It really enables you to have a more collaborative process than you even could have imagined before? Or is it basically frustrating you and holding you back? That it just doesn't have the features that you need to really do grant making, that it's might be allowing you to quote unquote manage the grant making process, but it's not enabling this collaborative, transparent, collective feeling and not just a feeling, but actual functionality. Are we at almost full participation of the poll, Yelena? Or close enough? We'll give you 10 seconds.
We're getting there, 71%.
I know we're looking for full participation, but 70 might have to be enough for this particular poll. I think we can go ahead and launch the results.
Okay, we'll stop at 77%.
Oh, interesting. This is actually really useful, I think, for this group, because half of you are like, yeah, I've got a platform that's doing what I needed to do. It's helping me actually run a collaborative, intentional, participatory process. And the other half of you are like, I can't with this platform anymore. It's not doing what I needed to do. It's frustrating me, and it's not allowing you to be the kind of funder or donor or collaborator, partner with communities that you want to be. So hopefully by the end of this session, we'll all have had a chance to learn from one another's experiences related to this, related to platforms, because we know that the process is valuable in itself, and what platform we use makes a difference. So with that, we're going to welcome our speakers. We're really lucky to have a great group. Next slide, please. Great. So we're really lucky to have a great group. We're first going to get a presentation from Melissa Zisengwe with People Powered. She's going to walk us through kind of just the broader understanding of what digital participation platforms are, what they can do, the features they have, and all of this. Then we're going to do a chat, essentially, with Yasmin Farah from Camden Giving, with Vasilis Charos, with Fund Action, and Joss Lerner with People Powered. And we're going to give you practical examples of what does it look like when a grant maker tries to use a platform very practically. What does it look like and feel like? And then we'll have a discussion together with all of you and as participants, and share some reflections and questions. So with that, we're going to pass it over to Melissa to give us a bit of a grounding understanding of what digital participation platforms are, like I mentioned, what they are and what they can do. So over to you, Melissa.
Thanks, Emily. Hopefully everyone can hear me just fine. So yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Good evening. I guess it is evening for me. My name is Melissa Zisengwe. I am a program associate at People Powered. I'm based in Cape Town. And today I'm just here to talk about, well, as Emily said, digital participation platforms. But to start off, just a quick intro to People Powered. Next slide, please. Yeah, so People Powered, at People Powered, our mission is to increase people's power to make decisions, government decisions, by supporting organizations and governments that are building participatory democracy around the world. And what do we mean by participatory democracy? Basically, it's a form of democracy that enables community members to make policy decisions that affect their lives together with the government. Now, there are many forms of participatory democracy, as you can see on your screen. These are just some of the ones that people focus on the most. For example, with participatory budgeting, that can be used in participatory budget grant making as well. But there are others. These are just a few that we thought we ought to mention, but there are others as the field is constantly experimenting with new methods. And thank you. Next slide, please. Oh yeah, next slide, the next one. These were some of the participatory democracy forms I was talking about. So yeah, what do we do at People Powered? We connect governments and organizations with the support they need to launch and improve participatory programs. We connect different resources, experts, and support to provide smoother pathways for governments to move towards participatory democracy. And part of this work involves connecting people with great resources and support that are already available. But we also create new communications, resources, training, and mentorship opportunities to fill in the gaps in these pathways. Next slide. And we also bring together a global community of practice, to do more together through various activities, like you can see on your screen. And the guide and the ratings that I am about to present are a perfect example of that. And these were projects that our members voted for as top priority, and they allocated funding towards it. So those are some of the resources I'll share with you. And if you're interested in joining our community, please let me know or let us know. There's me and Josh. Yeah. Next slide, please. So yeah, and the very next one. Just this. So yeah, speaking of digital participation platforms, it is quite an exciting time for digital participation, especially after COVID, and there's lots of opportunities on both sides for the government and the people who develop platforms. And digital participation tools basically enable governments and other organizations to engage people in collective activities, different activities. And there's a large number of comprehensive digital participation platforms that have been made to support governments, civil society groups, funding organizations, and other types of organizations to engage people in all types and all stages of participatory processes. Next slide. Yeah. Now, just to share some features of what most platforms offer, these are just some, not all of them. And our ratings and guide can help you sift through all of this information, because there is quite a lot of information. And with our ratings, you can find valuable information on the platforms based on expert and user input. And I've included some examples from the platforms and how people around the world have been using. So for example, on your screen, you see the pretty picture in red. In Kyrgyzstan, the platform Your Priorities is being used for discussing and voting on projects that are, important to the community. And basically, they chose this platform because they found it easy to use and it was quite flexible. And the other key reason they chose it was because it allows them to use one tool and they could store all their data in one platform, which is a key thing for a lot of people looking for this type of platforms. Next slide, please. Yeah, and another example here is Citizen Lab, which was used in Chile, I think. Yes, in Chile. And basically what they used for was to pitch ideas, to allow the youth to pitch ideas that align with the 17 SDGs. It allows them to apply, vote, and comment on their favorite ideas, as well as evaluate and select those ideas for further development. And they chose this platform because they said it had been used in many other countries. So it had a lot of experience behind it. And it offered one key feature, which is idea collection, which is what they really, really wanted. And they found their platform easy to use and very attractive to use for the youth as well. Next slide. And finally, two other examples are Consul, which has been used to enable participants to vote on projects they would like to allocate public funds to. And Delib has been used to host difficult conversations. For example, their simulator product lets the public officials invite participants inside so that residents can see the trade-offs of various decisions. So like residents can weigh in on which projects to prioritize in a resource-limited scenario. Next slide, please. So yeah, so as I mentioned, we do have two resources. One is the guide and the other is the rating. So our guide is basically, we know a lot of people are looking for guidance because there's a lot of platforms, as I mentioned, and our guide can offer you guidance and support so that you can explore these tools and find tools that can enable more participatory and deliberative democracy for your needs. So we don't know what your needs are, but the guide can help you figure out which platform is best for you, and it provides relevant, accessible, and practical guidance on how to select it and use online platform tools. And we try to create a guide that works in different global contexts. So our committee included a lot of members from around the world. And it aimed to help you understand how to review different tools, the questions you need to be asking yourself, and it provides you with tips on how to get started, because it's not usually that easy to get started with this type of things. Next slide, please. And then our ratings. So this is our second edition of our ratings. The first one we launched in 2021, and this year we rated 32 platforms. And the platforms were selected from an Airtable database, which was built by Matt Stimpek, who curates the Civic Tech database, the Civic Tech Field Guide. And other platforms that we rated during this second edition were suggested by our committee members. Additionally, other platforms were suggested by users. And we focused on the most widely used platforms. The platforms have been used in Africa, in at least 50 countries, in Africa, Asia, North America, Latin America, Eastern and Western America, and they've been used in the most common global languages. Next slide. And how do we rate these platforms? Well, we first started by putting them into 3 categories. So toolbox, specific tool, and specialty. Toolbox basically refers to tools that support a variety of participatory processes, so from start to finish. While specific tools, these are designed for a more specific step in a participatory process, such as proposal development. Then there's specialty, which includes platforms that focus on a specific type of participatory democracy, such as participatory budgeting or citizens' assembly. Next, please. And this is the criteria that we put together to rate the platforms. It's got cost, capacity requirements, features, accessibility, ethics and transparency, track record, and reliability. Now, I just want to, all these criteria they're quite important to the process, but I did want to point out the accessibility feature, that we really did focus on platforms that allow meaningful participation. So including those facing barriers, for example, if they offer functionality in multiple languages, or enable accessibility for people with disabilities, or low internet access in, there's many people around the world that have access to low internet. And this criteria can help you with comparing the platforms, understanding the cost elements and the different types of platforms and what each of them can offer. And I think I'll leave it there for now. Josh, our executive director, will share more about how these platforms can be used for grant making. Thank you, and I'll pass it back to Emily.
Thanks so much, Melissa. I feel like People Powered's guide here is sort of like being desperate, or being in a new place, in a new city, and being desperate to know your way around, like where are the best restaurants, where to go. And then you find out someone has like put it all together, rated, made all the considerations that are really important. That's a bit of a trivial example based on the seriousness of what we're talking about, but I wanted just to say a quick thank you from all of us on the line for the dedication and work that your team and thoughtfulness that your team has taken in going into the wide variety of considerations, especially the accessibility piece. If you have questions for Melissa, I have some of my own, even feel free to pop them in the chat, and she'll join us back again in the discussion section. And thankfully, she's dropped the link in the chat there. So now we're going to shift to a bit of a chat show discussion here. But first, both Josh, Yasmin, and Vasilis are going to walk you through practically what sort of these digital platforms look like and feel like for them. So I'll ask you each basically the same question. How do you use digital platforms, digital participatory platforms to move money, make funding decisions, run a grant making process? What does this actually look like and how does it work? And we'll keep with people powered initially. So over to you, Josh, to give us a really practical understanding of what does this mean for people powered.
Great, thank you so much, Emily. Next slide. So I'm Josh Lerner from People Powered, based in New York. And Melissa was talking about the resources that we have for digital participation. I'll talk about how we've actually used platforms as an organization. And People Powered is, we do programmatic work, but we also do fund work as well. And we run a democratically managed pooled fund and engage our members in deciding how to spend our resources and also to make decisions about the organization. So we've used one of the platforms organizationally for several years. Next slide. Our community who participates, so who is the community that's participating? It's our member organizations. Those are organizations at the local, national, and regional level that are providing direct support for participatory democracy programs. So there are NGOs who are working with governments to set up things like citizens' assemblies and participatory budgeting. So that is the kind of public that we're working with that is deciding how we spend our resources. And around over 80 organizations, majority are based in the Global South. Next slide. So what's our process? We've used a platform for several different things. Probably the most relevant here is for budget allocations to decide on spending. So each year for the past few years, we've invited our members to decide how to spend $200,000 on their top priorities. We've also used the platform to select our board of directors to engage our members in voting for that. We've used it for making policy decisions, organizational policy decisions. So there's several different tracks that we've used the platform for. This slide here is the process that we used at the end of last year, where we did both budget allocation and board of directors selection. And so we had a first stage that was basically getting ideas for what people wanted to spend money on through a series of calls and through asynchronous participation in the platform, also getting nominations for our board of directors. And then we had a stage to develop those ideas into proposals. And that was both asynchronous on the platform, I'll show in a second, and also through additional calls. And then we had a vote for the projects that would be funded and for people who would join our board. Next slide. So this is the platform that we use, Decidim, which is one of the top rated ones. It's open source and it's very widely used. It's the same platform also that Fund Action has used coincidentally. So this is just a screenshot of one of the stages, the idea collection stage. And you can see that people were able to propose ideas for projects they'd like to spend funds on. You can sort them by category on the left. You can have them display in different orders, whether that's random, whether it's alphabetical by amount of support. People can comment on the proposals, they can follow them, they can respond to them. And so it was really useful because we're a global organization in different time zones for people to be able to have a discussion asynchronously over several weeks and see what people wanted, to understand that, ask about it, and then gradually proceed through the process. At the top, you can see the other stages of the process. So each of those is a module that goes from ideas to proposals, and then a vote. Now it's vote results because we had the vote already. And it's there's a lot of different configurations to the platform. It's also very complicated, as you'll probably hear with Fund Action as well. So it's the pros and the cons. I wanted to answer both yes and no to the prompt question at the beginning. Like the platform has enabled us to do our work, and it also is often frustrating, to be honest, even though it's one of the best platforms. There's just so many things that you have to take care of. I'll talk a bit more later about some of those challenges, but next slide, last one for me. So these are just some of the projects that have been funded over the past several years through our platform. So it's, been from like $10,000 to actually this year we had one for $100,000. So different sizes, and everything from kind of research grants to developing technology to different events, translation, interpretation. So the events like this webinar can have interpretation. That's something that we actually put to our members. Maybe that's something that PGM community can do as well, and to see if people want to actually allocate funds to it. So it's a wide range of things. It's been really interesting and valuable for us, this process, as a way of being accountable to our community and having them be really clear about what they need, and then make the hard choices about how to allocate funds. And the platform has been a useful way to do that, and to create space for different people's participation. I will pass it off to the next slide, the next person.
Thanks, Josh. That gave us a good kind of peek into people-powered's inner decision-making, although it is, like you said, transparent by design anyway. But that was really interesting to see who used it both for the grant making, or sorry, for the budgeting process, but also for even board director positions and selection. So now Yasmin's going to help us understand a little bit about what using a platform looks like and feels like for Camden Giving. So yeah, over to you, Yasmin.
Thanks, Emily. Hi, everyone. I'm Yasmin. I hope you can all hear me clearly. So I'm from Camden Giving. We're a place-based funder in the borough of Camden in London. And the majority of our grantees are grassroots organisations. So we're quite focused on unlocking the traditional barriers to funding, including funding individuals directly, alongside a really high level of support to make that funding more accessible. And the majority of my role revolves around this, but I also look after most of our digital processes that support our participatory grant making. So our model is slightly different. We support and train members of the community in Camden to make the funding decisions for all of our grants programs. I actually sat on a panel myself a few years ago, so it's interesting being able to experience things from both sides. So I'll dive in. On the screen, we have an overview of the different tools that support our grant making process at each stage. This usually starts with an online application form, and we use form assembly to set those up. And you can do all sorts of things on there. You can create an application form with different question types, like a long or short answer form. Recently, I've done a lot of conditional formatting to embed eligibility criteria, like almost a quiz, into the application itself. You can allow applicants to save their progress and manage multiple different forms on the platform at the same time. And it's quite intuitive, I think, and there's lots of learning resources online as well, like demonstration videos. There's a big manual to sort of troubleshoot the common errors. And this feeds into our next stage, the panel review, or I suppose internal due diligence checking stage, where we use GrantFlex, and that's a product produced by -8. So it's a version of Salesforce that's designed specifically for grant makers. And because we have form assembly and GrantFlex can talk to each other. So we've set up an integration where all of the information from our application forms is fed straight into Salesforce. It will create new records for things. So on GrantFlex, we can manage all of our grants. We can see which stage of an application things are at. We can see, which dates grants were awarded, how much was requested or awarded. It'll also pull in contact information, so we can quite easily think, oh, I need to reach this person at that organization, and you can go and find their number and email address. So it works I guess, quite similar to Salesforce or any other CRM that you might be using. We also send emails from within the platform itself. So like after a panel meeting, we can send a follow-up to applicants or let them know of the outcome of their application through the platform itself. I also generate reports on there. So if we want to look at any specific trends in our funding, you can pull any of those data points that you have into a report and download it into like an Excel spreadsheet. And yeah, like it'll feed the other things that we create on form assembly into there as well. So like our grant agreement forms, any reporting forms, although we are moving away from that and more towards participatory reporting, everything will just sit in a unified like Salesforce record. Part of this is also the external reviewer platform, which is a, like, I guess, simpler version of Salesforce, specifically for our panelists to like log in and read applications before the panel meetings. So it will have all the key information about an application on there. You can see budgets or anything that's come along with an application, and we can filter off any personal information and keep that on our version. And we found that quite useful. We use that in the panel meetings itself, just to sort of read through applications with the panels. The Excel spreadsheets are a nice and easier version of applications that we can produce for people that maybe will have trouble logging into the platform. And the final stage, the decision-making part of our process. So we normally have in-person meetings. We've got the luxury of being just in Camden, so most people can come in. And we use Slido, which is we're on the free plan, the basic plan, and it lets you create polls. So they can be like multiple choice polls. You can rank things. Again, quite a few different formats for the type of questions you can create there. The way that we use that is for our panelists to vote on different things during the meetings. So they can vote on whether or not they want to fund an application, whether they need more information about something. And that's anonymous, and we can see the results live. So it's quite helpful to have that during the meetings. And we'll always sort of support that with lots of discussion around the applications before going to a vote. And the final platform on there is Time to Spare, which is one that we have started using quite recently. So Time to Spare has been set up to help charities save time and get like a clearer picture of their services. I suppose it's like really, really useful for organizations that are doing lots of delivery work. So you can, track the needs of your community quite easily on there. You can see the demand for different services. You can have a calendar of, events and what's going on. You can create case notes and track who's coming to things and make it easier to demonstrate, I guess, the impact of those services to funders. But the way that we use it is to manage our alumni community. So Camden Giving's alumni community is something that was set up to make sure that the work that we're doing with our panels wasn't extractive. A lot of people wanted to work with Camden Giving a lot longer than just the panel term. I mean, I'm a prime example of that. So the alumni network is formed of Camden citizens who have previously held a grant with us as a citizen grantee, or have sat on a panel, and that large community of people, I think it's about 200 at the moment, they actively participate in events with us, but also through Time to Spare have the power to make decisions about the future of Camden Giving on a much larger scale. So the size of our grants, that sort of thing. Next slide, please. So this is a snapshot of our Time to Spare platform and how we're using it to manage the alumni community. And so I've filtered out a lot of the personal information of our alumni on there, but what you can see is that we've got all of our contact details for our alumni members, protected characteristics. You can launch surveys from within the app itself, and it'll go out to the whole community. And if it's not anonymous, it will also track like the voting record of each alumni member. So it's interesting again to pick out trends from that. It's a lot more like bulky or more informative, I guess, than a Slido poll, because you can add information to the questions. You can put you can add a link to a slideshow or pop a video on there, so that, people are having a lot more context before they vote on a decision, whereas Slido is more quick and easy during the panel meetings where we're there to explain things. And yeah, time to spare, it's you've got that like interaction history as well, so you can see when we're engaging with alumni, when they're sort of dropping off. And quite excitingly, I'm also working with them to create something more bespoke for us, where we can have more access to data during our panel meetings. So feeding in information from public data sets that we can see visually. So more to come on that. Hopefully I'll share it at the next one of these, whenever that is. But yeah, that's, I guess, like a whistle-stop tour of our grant making and the few tools that support us along the way.
Thanks so much, Yasmin. I think what I appreciate about all of the different tools that you use is that it's a lot too likely to manage each of these different pieces, but that's because you all are trying to be really intentional about the different phases of the process. And in this case, not one platform solves for all of these things. So Camden Giving is making a real effort to find what platform can really serve that purpose. And I'm sure some people on the line are maybe a little bit like, oh, wow, I have to use that many platforms to manage one process. And so we're going to get into the challenges around that, although some of them you said speak to each other. But I really do admire your dedication of trying to find the right platform to do which pieces of this. And we can get more into the challenges of that a little bit later on. So Vasilis, you're here representing Fund Action today. Tell us a little bit about how you all use platforms in your decision making.
Thank you, Emily. And yes, I wanted to start by agreeing with the fact that there isn't one platform to rule them all. I think that all of us are using different tools and trying to make the best to fit on to our processes and workflows. Today I will be presenting about the basic platform that we use in Fund Action, which is actually the same platform as People Powered, the Zisengwe platform. Hello everyone, my name is Vasilis Chrysos. I'm from Fund Action and I'm based in Greece. Fund Action is a European grassroots activist closed collective coming together since 2017 to reinvent how grant making is being made for activists. We are using Decidim, as I said. Coming back to Josh's comment, we also face various frustrations using this platform, but it makes it possible for us to do all the work that we need to do as a collective. We wish that we had many more functionalities and different things. Maybe this is an opportunity to extend a call for other organizations who are also using Decidim to bring together all our common frustrations and do something about it. Being an open source platform, we can fund someone to solve the problems for us. Our community members are people who have an account in our platform, and each member has their profile in the platform, which helps them connect with other members. Although the social aspect of the specific platform is quite limited, and I'll speak about this later. As you can see here in the slide, we have this is one of the processes that we use for one of our grants. So how does this look? The first step is we open the call, make it available to members, and invite them to submit their proposals. And proposals are submitted in our platform by members. And then the rest of the community members can comment and contribute to the proposals. It's a form of peer feedback that we are facilitating through this process. For one of our grants, we have a phase of a concept note. So people will submit their concept note, receive peer feedback from the community members, and then on the next step, submit their final proposal. And after that comes the phase of voting, where we call on members to read through the proposals that have been submitted and vote for the ones that they want to be funded. Each member has 5 votes, and yeah, the voting phase can be a challenging phase process for our community members if we have a lot of proposals. So if we have like, I don't know, 30 proposals submitted, it might be challenging for all the members to read through all the proposals and do their voting. So this is a challenge that we're trying to find ways to circumvent through mostly not technical aspects of the platform only, but also through ways of deliberating with our community. After the voting step, there is for this specific grant, there is a peer-to-peer panel which is doing the review of the most voted proposals. I think it's the 10 most voted proposals, and from this 10 comes the list of the proposal that will receive the grant. And then we have the project implementation and the feedback and the reports that come back to the community by the members who are applying the grant. Next slide. So this is how it looks. This is how the inside of our platform looks. As you can see, we have the number of submitted proposals, and then on the right you can see each one of the proposals. You can follow some proposals so that you get notified for new comments, so that it is easier for people to participate in the ongoing dialogue around some specific project. And you can see the various steps on the top in the menu as a proposal, peer-to-peer panel review, and results. We use the same platform to not only to vote for to submit proposals and to vote for the submitted proposals, but also to decide on issues of governance within our community. So to vote for members of the facilitation group, for the board members. So it's really a tool that is being used as holistic, let's say, approach to how we do our deliberations as a community. It remains, a big challenge remains that it is in English, so we also face this issue of, let's say, exclusion of non-native English speaking persons. But yeah, this platform, being open source, also offers the possibility for translations of the environment in other languages. Yeah, I think I'll stop here.
Sure.
Just, yeah, and pass the mic to you, Emily. Thanks.
Thanks, Vasilis. I think one thing that is standing out to me about this is we are going into quite a bit of detail about the platforms. I mean, not at the depth of that it really takes to do this, but we're giving you and are trying to go into the details here a bit because the truth is the details matter. I think how these platforms function, these sort of seemingly, okay, this step and then that step and then that step, in reality, that is the value, that is the process, and how well this is executed, how well the platform can enable this sort of collaborative, transparent process that we're all trying to take what has been a kind of a old, stifled, traditional process and turn it on its head. Often comes down to things like this. How do the platforms function? How comfortable are people using different features? How well can people use different aspects of it? And so I really genuinely appreciate those of you who are on the line who are trying to look at these details and really make sense of what is really happening here and what makes this possible and what else possible. So Josh, those who are on the line who are like, okay, great, these are really thoughtful, participatory budgeting and funding and even staffing and leadership decision-making, but I'm just getting started. Can you give us some tips? What do people who are really, just starting to explore digital participation platforms, what do they need to consider? How should they start?
Sure. And yeah, I think that people should consider it, definitely. And a lot of what to consider is the same as if you're shopping for anything or if you're looking for restaurants. So these are products, there's a marketplace, and you need to select carefully. So 3 main recommendations. First, I would say start by deciding what you need and your budget. That will shape what you may want to use. So for what you need, who do you want to engage? How many people? Where are they? What languages do they speak? What are their kind of technological capacities or skills? Be really clear about what you want to do with the platform, and also your budget. These things can run from like very cheap to much more, and they can seem very cheap and end up costing more than you expect originally. So be very clear about how much you can pay upfront, but also for maintenance, for yearly maintenance. Because it's not just you set it up once and then it runs smoothly. For most of these, there are some ongoing fees as well. They're not huge when in relative to other expenses that grant makers would have, but they are significant, and that may influence what you want to choose. The second recommendation would to shop around, review and consider multiple options. Don't just go with one that Vasilis and I or Fund Action and People Powered are using because you say, oh, 2 people are using it, therefore I'll use it. Like there are a lot of great platforms, and what's good for us may not be what's good for you. So don't assume that that something is the right fit for you. Consider a few different ones. It'll give you a better sense of what the differences are, and probably even give you a better sense of what you need and what you would actually use. And definitely consult the ratings that we have for this. And that's really the purpose of them, as people said, hey, it's hard to make this decision. There's not a lot of objective information out there. Most of the materials on these platforms are promotional materials by the platforms themselves, which always like oversell what they can do and undersell how much it will cost you and how much work it will take. So we've tried to put together more objective, neutral information for you. So really hope it can be useful. And if you have feedback, let us know. And the third recommendation would be to consult with experts and platform users. Don't just talk with the developers, talk with users, talk with people who've used these platforms. You're welcome to reach out to me or Melissa or the other speakers, I imagine, as well, and can give you candid feedback. But always ask to speak with a few people who have used the platforms, just to give you a better sense of what's really involved, and so that you don't end up with surprises. Because there will be surprises, but you want to minimize that because otherwise it can be a lot of work. And you have a lot of important things to do. So I want to make sure you can plan realistically around that.
Great, thanks, Josh. I think those are some really good tips for those of us who are either trying to identify a new platform, make a change, or better understand what's happening. And of course, yeah, Josh kindly has offered himself and Melissa, you as well, for feedback and recommendations, but also feel free to use the Slack channel and the listserv. People have been asking each other tips and tricks there. And of course, this space today is for that as well. Now, Yasmin, you mentioned that Camden Giving is a place-based funder, and I can see that there's a couple of other community-based funders on the line as well. Can you help us to understand a little bit more? You talked about some of the considerations, but what are the particular considerations that those on the line who are place-based or community-based funders need to really consider when they're choosing a digital tool to support their process?
I guess the main one that pops up for me when thinking about the way we do our grant making, with like such a massive involvement from communities being panelists themselves, just to be very, very mindful about digital exclusion and how sometimes going too digital could create problems for your panelists, whether that's because of age or a disability. I think none of our external processes solely rely on some sort of tech system. Like in our panel meetings, we have the luxury of, being able to have them in person, and then making those extra considerations for people that can't be there for whatever reason. So like at the interview stage for our panelists, we'll ask if they have any access requirements, like whether they need a phone or, a laptop, or if they have access to Wi-Fi. And if need be, we can provide them with equipment or, a dongle to get online. Some people might have challenges reading because of eyesight, or maybe they have like dyslexia or something that would make it difficult for them to log on to our external reviewer platform and, read through 10 applications before the panel meeting. So our head of grants, Dan, has actually purchased a software called Dragon Read and Write. So it's like a speech recognition and dictation software that has supported those panelists with additional needs to be able to access and read through applications ahead of meetings and truly participate in the process. Like I've sat down with citizen grantees and provided like training to get onto new software. My colleague Shafi, who manages the alumni community, onboards people if they're stuck at any point in the process. It's something that we of course will probably have gaps in as well, just like our approach to tackling digital exclusion, but then also moving towards digital things that make our processes more efficient, and I guess just remembering not to go too digital without providing those safeguards.
That's a really good point. I know Melissa mentioned that in the guide they took a close look at accessibility, but what you're sharing, Yasmin, is that even with those considerations, there's still very likely going to be gaps. And in order to really know how in your case, you call them citizen grantees or grant makers, what are their needs? If you don't know the answer to that question, then you're not really going to know if the platform that you have actually is allowing them to participate or supporting their ability to participate. You all are taking the time to really understand what are people's needs, and then double checking, does our platform even allow for this? Do you have to buy an extra software? Do you need to do a training on the tool itself? So this is really critical. And of course you can reference, the accessibility rating on the guide from People Powered, but you likely are going to have to go beyond that given the limitations. And I heard Vasily's making a call to all of us that maybe we should put out some sort of a plea. Plea sounds too desperate. Put out a demand. I don't know what we can say, but something to try to make sure that platforms are really recognizing these continued limitations. Yeah. So with that, Vasilis, what would you say is, I know Fund Action is consistently aspires to be better and better and improve over time, but it sounded like there were limitations to the platform that are actually making it difficult for you to achieve your dreams and your aspirations of having a even deeper, more collaborative grant making and process here. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, in fact, participatory grant making is about participation, right? So you want to make and Fund Action is a online community of activists. We get together once per year for our assembly, but most of our interactions and our deliberations are made online. Excuse me. So, which means that you need to have to create a safe online space, a space of trust, a space of where people feel confident that they can express themselves and they can participate equally. This is the social aspect of these tools, these platforms, how they allow or not allow you to create this space and provide your members, your community members, with the necessary tools to interact. So from that perspective, I'd say that Decidim is not very well versed towards community building functionalities, and I'm not sure if that was that is made on purpose, because I know that people are usually they use other places to build their communities, other tools. There are social media platforms and whatnot. But this is a continuing challenge for our community, especially because we don't know each other. We come together digitally. We have limited opportunities to be together physically. So we need to facilitate this as much as possible on the digital space.
Interesting. So you're saying that some people have to go to social media, which have its own issues, to build community, and then hope that transitions over to another platform where you're doing the decision making, how money moves, who gets resources, and that sort of gap is significant.
Yeah, and I think this is a natural way for people to behave, because you don't switch context all the time by switching tools and switching, your relationships to people. It's all very organic. It happens organic in real life, organically. So yeah, it should happen organically also through the tools that we are using.
But at the current, it's not quite so organic. It's a bit forced of connecting different tools. Yeah.
Now it's not happening this way. So we need to find ways to compensate for this lack of integrated tools in the platform. So yeah, this happens, for example, through online meetings. We try to hold online meetings. We had not only for decision making, but sometimes also for social events, and things that will create this sense of community, this sense of belonging, and this sense of trust, which is so important for people to own the process and participate.
Great. So I think thanks to our colleagues on the line, they've really given us, kind of a sense of the state of using digital participatory platforms for grant making. We welcome questions and comments here. We did get one in advance, which I'm going to pose to Melissa while others get their questions top of mind. We got a question in advance from Tyler from Karibu Foundation, asking a bit more about using participatory platforms in the Global South context. I know Yasmin talked about the exclusion, the digital exclusion, even in Camden, but could you elaborate a little bit on this? Was it considered in the guide, and what do people need to know who work more internationally?
That's a serious question. I think I just want to point out that we did a user survey during our last ratings, and we actually did receive a lot of responses, user responses from Africa. So from countries like Djibouti, Ethiopia, Angola, Algeria, just to name a few. And these were responses from people that are using the platforms that we were rating. So these platforms are, while they might be based in the global north, they are used everywhere, including Africa. And I think they are making considerations where they are. I think the shortcomings might be with issues of language, but I think where there are issues of internet access and such, they are trying to implement low tech or low internet access options as well, because we did see that there is quite a bit of usage across the continent, which is something that was quite surprising to us. So it means that people are using the platforms, we're just not aware. And sometimes what you need to do is actually go into these platforms' websites and go into their case studies, because that's where you will probably find that the platform is being used in, like, I don't know, South Africa for some participatory budgeting, and you won't know this type of things because unfortunately they're not very forward with the information about where the platform is being used. Some are, some are not. And just to put it shortly, I think there are platforms that are making considerations, not all of them. And I think there's a lot that they need to consider, right? Language, disability, women, youth, you know, there's a lot of issues that people need to accommodate for. And I don't know if they'll be able to accommodate everyone all the time, but I think depending on what you need and who you need to reach, you will be able to find a platform that can accommodate your needs, whether it's language, whether it's disability, and all of that. I don't know if Josh has anything to add.
Yeah, I guess just feel bold to adapt the platform to your context, and don't always do what the developers say is best based on their context, especially because most of the developers are based in the global north. So for example, like we use Decidim, and it's good for many things. The developers we worked with encouraged us to use it more for meetings and like events. And we found that it was actually impeding participation more than it was helping it. And that we're using just Zoom or Jamboard or kind of simpler tools was more accessible for a lot of our members. In the Global South, but also more broadly, to be honest. So don't feel that you have to use them for everything. See where it adds value, and it's okay to mix and match different tools as well.
Yeah, just to add quickly to Josh's point is a lot of these platforms are also open source, and I know open source is quite big in Africa, especially in the civic tech community. So if you have that in mind, you can probably find something that you can adapt to your needs as well.
Great. So we have one question coming in so far, and I have another also, which I'm going to use facilitator liberties and ask my question first while other people are popping theirs up, or, you can raise your hand as well. But a question I had was, power dynamics can be felt virtually as well, but using a participatory platform can help to tamp down some of those power dynamics. I know, Melissa, you mentioned that there was a platform, I think you said, was it in Caracas, or I can't remember now exactly, but you mentioned, where government duty bearers were meant to be responding to citizens, especially young people's proposed ideas. And so I'm wondering, can you speak about what you see is like the advantage of the digital platforms for possibly making it actually, not just like that the oldest person who's obviously the oldest in the room when you're physically together, maybe they speak first, or people listen to them more or to their opinion on which one they think should be the highest voted idea. But in a digital space, that sort of power dynamic can be dampened. And so people can feel a freedom to express themselves, like Vasilis mentioned, with possibly more confidence or freedom if they're not in a room where either they can actually be identified, possibly under threat or other things, or just the comfort of being able to express yourself in a place where you can't be identified. So there's pros and cons to this. I realize the in-person that Yasmin mentioned is always going to be valuable. Humans like to be with humans. That's just our nature. But that maybe there's this advantage of the power dynamic being, a little bit more accounted for digitally. Would any of you like to talk about whether or not you think that's true, how you've seen it play out, how it could be factored into your using the platform? Anyone have? Vasilis, yeah, go for it.
Thanks for asking this, Emily. This is really interesting, and this is something that we face all the time. Not only as a fund action community, but I think many of us also in our work, if we work online. I'd say that digital platforms might seemingly help overcome or mitigate or dampen some of these power dynamics, but they create space for other power dynamics to show up. For example, people who feel more at ease with technology versus people who do not have these skills or the needed to participate in some online call, for example, which means that older people have a disadvantage here usually, or people from places where technology is not very much used, in countries of the global south, for example. One example of some power dynamics that we see in our community comes as a result of a let's say a social interaction that is happening, but also digitally. So we have some people who are very well known, or who have a network within our community, so who know people, who have relationships, which means that when they submit a proposal, they have more people that know them and more people to vote for them. So this kind of rigs the voting process for people who are less known, for newer members. Some newer members might also be timid and not even submit a proposal because they are afraid of the feedback that they might receive, whether it's going to be a sincere and constructive feedback, or because they still don't know the community. So there are these are all, I think, examples of power dynamics at play, which might not be obvious at the beginning, but
right, as the relationships, virtual relationships and personalities come through. So your warning to us is, no, you might not have some elements of power dynamics, but know that a digital platform is not going to be solving for all of these things. Humans will find a way to rank each other, unfortunately, and set a hierarchy. Unfortunately, so it's important to be aware of this, that you're not solving for all of that. Yeah, Yasmin.
Yeah, so just to sort of touch on that as well, I mentioned that we have a lot of our panel meetings in person, and we do for most funds, but for our smallest fund, it runs on a rolling basis throughout the year. and the panel meet every 2 weeks, so it'd be like a massive commitment for them to come in person. And
Right.
some of them do, but we offer hybrid meetings, and that has been particularly challenging for a few different reasons. I guess one of which is that, like, how those power dynamics show up. Like, a lot of the time people in the room have got, you know, like the loudest voices, I guess, in the discussion. And I mean, we sort of start off every panel meeting with the typical, like, you know, these are the sort of ground rules that you guys have come up with. This is how we work. But we also, like, during the meeting, if we're not hearing from people, we'll try to bring them into the conversation, particularly people that are joining us on Zoom.
And do you use that poll functionality? You mentioned that some of the panels you try to do a poll, so you kind of bring everybody together using a digital piece when there's a hybrid, or am I making that up as something that I've not been to one of these meetings? I could only be so lucky, but yeah, does that, so you sometimes use a digital tool to bring everybody together when it's hybrid?
Yeah, we use Slido just to make the final anonymous vote.
Okay.
But all of the, like, discussion of the application will sort of happen in a hybrid setting. And we've honestly, like, we've had so many tech issues in those meetings, like presenting things during, like, to a physical group, but then also to people online, and getting that, like, nightmare Zoom feedback sound when you play a video or something. And we are slowly figuring things out tech-wise. So that's like a practical issue of, like, hybrid meetings. Yeah, like, I guess just making sure that people who are joining on Zoom are just as engaged in the conversation, coming up to that, like, vote, just is something that we're always quite conscious of, and just making sure that the conversation doesn't just stay in the room when it's hybrid. It's almost always easier if it's just in one place, like if it's fully in person or fully remote, like, that's fine. But with hybrid, there's just so much more to manage. It's almost like two different groups that you're trying to bring together. In terms of how, like, it doesn't really affect the voting much, apart from, like, if we're missing votes and we sort of have to, you know, shout out to people like, hey, have you voted yet? And you don't know if someone's gone for a toilet break, for example, on Zoom. But like, things on Slido normally go quite smoothly. Yeah, it's more just like the power play of the discussion itself.
Well, we have one last question, unless someone comes in here at the end, but essentially we have a question that's asking, okay, we've highlighted that the platforms enable some things, other things make it more complicated. Be aware that it's not going to solve all of your grant making woes. But the question is, do we know of improvements that are coming? Or are we moving in a direction where, let's say, one foundation can afford to develop a specialized, expensive platform for themselves, but that maybe there's not this opportunity for others? Are we seeing improvements? Can our PGM and people-powered community anticipate platforms improving? Do we need to do some collective advocacy around this? What is coming down the pipeline here? I see Josh nodding a lot, so I'm hoping maybe he can give us some clarity that yes, it's improvements are coming, or no, we need to do advocacy, or what are you seeing in sort of the trend in this direction?
I can start, but then others please join in too. I mean, certainly the technology is improving each year, and both individual platforms and the selection of platforms and tools that are available. There's a lot more that is necessary and that could be done, and that could be done with additional funding as well. I would say that a lot of these platforms are still pretty small teams, and that I think if we were able collectively to invest some resources in this space, it would serve us all a lot better. And our goal for the ratings isn't just to help people decide what platforms to use, but ideally it's to improve the quality of the platforms, to say, here are the things that make them good, or that can make platforms good, and to point out ways that they can improve. So What we hear from platforms often is that that's hard, which is fair. And so if there's anything we can do to support them, whether it's through funding, whether it's through kind of peer learning or creating spaces for learning and applying some best practices, that would be really helpful. The one thing I would definitely recommend not doing is creating a new platform from scratch. We often get inquiries about this, like from some random person who wants to create their platform to fix all of the world's problems. And it's generally not a good use of time. There's other people who have done that already. It's hard to do. And so would encourage funders not to like try to make their own proprietary or their own platform. Like start by seeing what's out there already and how you can build on that.
That's a great reminder for all of us here who are, trying to sort out how we can use these platforms, and maybe there can be some kind of collective power in trying to advance this. And when you were talking, Josh, it reminded me a bit about how they did more public rankings of like airlines and who was or wasn't providing meals or leg room or different things. And so it's I can see that would put a bit of pressure on the field of participatory platforms to better serve the grant making piece. And of course, making it known that there are more and more funders, foundations, community funds, activist-led groups that are actually looking for this kind of a product, knowing that there actually is a market, quote unquote, for this kind of service, that not everyone's looking for a traditional grant heavy, typical grant management platform, that there are others of us, hopefully all of you and others on the line, who are looking for something that enables us to turn the process on its head, because that's what we're all trying to figure out, how to do this and use the platforms. So with that, we don't have any more questions, so we'll let others go. I'll pause here for a moment to let anyone speak up who's really keen, either in the chat or by raising your hand. But perhaps while people are doing that, we can put up the last slide. Yelena, I know others have offered to be in touch with those on the line, just so that everyone knows how to get in contact with our groups today. Here's the contact details, and most groups are available on most of the platforms. So do reach out, follow their work, get in touch using the emails here. And we do hope that maybe there can be some follow-up specifically on better understanding and doing some collective work to improve these platforms to better meet all of our needs.
Yeah, we'll be sending out a follow-up email to all the participants with all the links included. I didn't want to put everything now, bombard the chat, but there will be a follow-up email with all the information and the recording.
That's great. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining. Look forward to follow-up conversations, and good luck using your platforms to do good work.
Thanks,
Everyone.
everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
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 Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. See you later.
See you. Bye.